back. Joining me in the studio now is Rosemary Conder, who's the Executive Director of CASA of the Ohio Valley, and we also have Watson, who is the CASA mascot with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This is April is National Child Abuse Month, and today you're going to help us kind of figure out how to recognize signs of abuse and how to report those suspicions. So this is very serious and something that we take very seriously. Let's begin with sharing some statistics with our folks. And what kind of statistics do you have as far as for Davis County and Kentucky for abuse and neglect?
One of the things that tragically we see is those numbers are trending upward each year. Hundreds or actually thousands of cases are reported each year in Kentucky and in Davis County, and then out of that the cabinet is responsible to investigate them, and then out of that those substantiated where they warrant further investigation, those cases number in the hundreds and thousands. So in Kentucky there are 8,000 children in out-of-home care now.
Okay.
So in Davis County last year, there was reported to be, again, there were thousands of cases reported, but about 700 were substantiated. That means that they needed more investigation. The Cabinet for Child Services involved in some situation. Then out of those hundreds, and probably 200 of those end up in the court system.
Oh, wow. And, you know, as you mentioned, 700 are reported. It just kind of makes you wonder how many aren't being reported yet.
Absolutely. One of the things that we're hoping that with all the efforts nationwide and locally to increase public awareness of what to look for in child abuse and neglect cases has increased that number of reporting. That's what we're hoping, that those trends are not just that maybe people are realizing not just morally and ethically their duty, but they have a legal duty to report suspected abuse. So with that, increasing that awareness, we hope that those numbers are increasing for that reason also.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people probably, they see some things, they might think it's abuse, but, you know, they may be not sure. So that leads us into, you know, let's talk about how to recognize signs of abuse and neglect.
Well, one of the things, there's different categories of abuse and neglect. You know, of course, we have sexual abuse and physical abuse, but we have medical neglect and emotional abuse, and we also have neglect in education. That's where we see a lot of truancy. The kids are not going to school. We see food neglect and those kind of just basic rights of a human to be cared for that are being, you know, neglectful. So there's different levels of that, and that's the thing that we want the public to know is they don't have to prove anything. They have to report suspected cases.
Okay.
So, and that's what's tough because sadly there's so many cases that minimum level of care that sometimes you might report that, gosh, these kids that live next door to me, they don't, their clothes don't fit them, they're hungry, they're always asking for food. Sometimes, sadly, that's acceptable in child welfare, and it's because there are so many cases.
You know, in something like that, you know, I think, you know, if you see a bruise on a child, and, you know, that could be because they fell down.
Absolutely. There's indicators, physical abuse too. There's certain bruises that are more likely indicators of abuse. Anything around the face and neck, that especially if you could see a handprint, you know, that kind of thing, those absolutely need to be reported. But if the child, you know, when there's a certain age where toddlers have normal bumps and bruises and scrapes and that kind of thing, and that's okay, that's normal. But what we are not called to decide that. If it's suspicious and if the child repeatedly has bruises, or if they seem afraid, or if they, you know, there's other things. I think especially people who are connected to the child, daycare workers, in the school system, that kind of thing. If you're in a grocery store and you see a parent abusing a child, you have a duty to report that. So it can put you in a precarious situation sometimes, but our goal is to protect the children as much as we can.
Yeah, because I think you also have to recognize the fact that if let's say a parent is lack of a better term, beating on a kid in a grocery store, if they're willing to do that in public, you often have to ask yourself, are they refraining at this point, restraining themselves? And if so, what happens at the house?
Right.
And I would really think that the school system would be a real integral part of determining, or at least seeing signs.
They are, and I think they are one of the best reporters of suspicious activity, you know, for children, because they're with them so much and they get to know the children and kind of what, if something in their behavior changes, you know, that they've something is a flag for them to, so that something may be going on, that they report to the cabinet.
Yeah, you know, I know the Goodfellows Club, who is very great organization here locally. I know they do a lot of things for kids. If kids, you know, have a toothache, they're very good about determining if a child is in pain or neglected of something, they can't study, they can't function.
Right.
And so they will go in and take care of those things for them, help them out. But would that be a form of neglect if a parent just simply can't afford maybe dental care? Or
No, well, actually, it could be a form of neglect, but not in a bad way. Like sometimes the parents just need a hand up. So there's a difference. If in that situation, if the child is having a lot of tooth pain or cavities or really problems with their gums, and no one is intervening, and they've offered to the parents, but they're not, then that's where the cabinet would have to get involved. You know, where the child's physical health is in jeopardy.
Right.
So, but then again, the first thing the cabinet does is try to help the family get the resources that they need, connect them to those services. So they don't automatically take them away. They try to study what's happening, you know, what's going on in the family.
Right.
Do they know that those services are available?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Okay.
So.
Well, you know, I guess at what point, and I'm asking this kind of like for myself, at what point when I see something going on, let's say in a grocery store, and a parent is, let's say, beating their child, at what point do I make the determination that I think that's abuse?
Well, in Kentucky, corporal punishment is legal.
Okay.
So a parent can spank a child.
Okay.
And there is a difference between discipline and abuse. But if I think it's been in social media recently of a man that had a child in a store, and he deliberately hit him with the door, beat him, stomped him, a toddler. And so those are extreme. You would automatically call for help, you know, that kind of thing. But if you see them grabbing the child up and shaking them, that's always a no. Sometimes it can be as easy as you walking up and trying to help diffuse the situation.
Right.
But if you see it, if they're dragging the child, if they're hurting the child, and you need to tell them, I'm going to report it. Well, then how are you going to report it? You don't even know who they are.
Right.
If you look at the car and get their license plate number and that kind of thing, you definitely don't want to put yourself in any danger. And a lot of people, when they're in the moment, will tell you to mind your own business and, you know, that kind of thing. But you still have a duty to report. And if you think the child is in imminent danger, you call 911.
Okay.
You know, if it's something like a child in your church group, and you just keep noticing these odd bruises or something, and then you can call and report that on the state level, because it's not just an emergency. The child seems to be doing okay. It's just suspicious.
Okay. So, but obviously, if you see some serious neglect and abuse happening right in front of you, like you said, dragging a child down an aisleway or something, or shaking them or whatever, then it's time to take immediate action.
Yeah, and you just can always call 911.
Okay.
Because it's not your job to report it to the store.
Okay.
It's your job to report it.
Okay.
In Kentucky, you as an individual you're protected by the law, but you're also required to report it.
Right.
So if you go to the store manager and like, look at this, you probably should do that, but still you have that duty to make sure that it's reported.
To take the next step to report it.
Yeah.
Okay, well that brings us to how, if you do see somebody being neglected and abused, how do they report their suspicions?
Well, again, if it's an immediate danger where you feel like that the child is in imminent danger, then always call 911. That's their job, to come and diffuse the situation, begin the investigation. They can call social services, that kind of thing. If it's something where you suspect some neglect in particular, then there's a number that you can call at the state level, and it's 1-877-KY SAFE 1. So it's KYSAFE, the number 1.
Okay.
And but then they also have a website, and we have a local number for our DCBS, Department of Child-Based Services. So there are a lot of resources that people can find to report, but
Okay.
you can always call CASA. We'll try to help you out.
Right.
Get you connected to the right number. anyway.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
so let's take me through what happens to the child if abuse and neglected is actually discovered.
Once it's discovered, once the state, the Department for Child-Based Services, investigates it, and they decide that then they have to go through their criteria of, does it warrant removing the child? Is the child in imminent danger? Because as tragic as abuse and neglect are, removing a child from their environment is very traumatic. So they really try to avoid that at all costs. They try to see if there is a way that they can connect the family to resources that they need, to therapy, to medical services, anything like that the child is missing and the family needs some help, then they really do work to try to keep that family together for the child's sake. If they find that the child is in danger of any kind of neglect or abuse, then they will look for the nearest, safest relative to take the child so that that's less traumatic. If they go to grandma or they go to an aunt or uncle, someone that they know. Now in Kentucky, we're so proud of the state for stepping up and taking the child's best interest at heart, and they've allowed for a victive care, which means if the next door neighbor is someone that the child feels really safe with and they are a good environment, then they can take the child. So that they're trying to lessen the trauma that the child goes through. But then that family still is held to the same standards as a foster home.
Okay.
They investigate the home and make sure that they're not putting them in another bad situation. So it is a daunting task for our social workers, and they need a lot of support from the community, and they do an amazing job.
Yeah. So now if we get to the point to where there is obvious abuse and neglect, and suddenly the child finds themselves now in the system, as we may call it, this is where CASA comes in.
Right. When the case actually makes it to the court, and at some point social services says we need the judge involved, we need the courts involved, because the parents can't or won't comply with this case plan, this care plan that we've given them to say, this is how you get the child back, this is what's best for the child. So if the parent can't or won't comply, then the courts get involved, and the judge makes the decision in the best interest of the child, what should be happening.
Right.
So the court has the authority to order treatment, to order counseling, to order health care issues, that education, that they go to school, those kind of things, and intervene. So then the family court judge will appoint a CASA volunteer to be another set of eyes and ears for the court. The social workers, again, are just so overwhelmed. Yes. So our volunteers are amazing. They take one case or two cases with just a few children, so they can spend more time, get to know the children and what they need, make observations about how they're doing in school and how they're doing with their family or their foster family and that kind of thing. And then we report back to the judge and make recommendations from what we see, what we feel like would benefit the child, and then the judge uses those recommendations to help her make her decision and what's in the best interest for the child.
Okay. In our area, I know sometimes when a child is taken out of a home, they're put into foster care.
Right.
Do we have a sufficient amount of foster care families here in Owensboro?
No. We there statewide and nationwide, there's a shortage of foster homes, but when you look at 8,000 children in Kentucky and out of home care already, and that's just in foster care. That's not living with grandma and aunts and uncles and that kind of thing. So there's definitely not enough foster care homes. I know that they're trying to recruit them every day. And again, our foster families are incredible. What they take on, they give their heart and their homes to these children. They do get paid, for what their services, and rightly so.
Absolutely.
But there's definitely a shortage and a real need in the community for more.
And I think they've recently passed some legislation that where grandparents and other relatives can be treated like foster care
Yes.
families and get paid to help support this child.
Yeah, and that was something that the state was really falling down on. And again, it's that craziness of the budget can't support paying people, but we need to do that because we have grandparents that are living on fixed income that can't afford to feed these children extra or buy them clothes for school or that kind of thing. And so they were really having to decide between their medication and that kind of thing. And that was wrong. And it was really, we've seen cases where the grandparents want the children, but they can't afford them.
Right.
So now with the state stepping up and passing the bill where the relatives qualify for the same amount of pay as a foster care family, it's going to make a tremendous difference in the state.
Because I think you'll have more relatives stepping up
Oh gosh, yeah.
who can possibly take care of the child, and that's a much better situation for the child.
It really is for the child to be in an environment where they know the person and they feel safe. And not that foster families don't do all they can to create that environment, but it's still less traumatic for the child in most cases.
Absolutely. And a lot of grandparents, listen, they've raised their children.
Yeah.
They're in retirement. They didn't plan on raising another child. So, that is only, that's great news,
Yeah,
really.
it is.
Well,
It is.
Rosemary, how can viewers get additional information about CASA or fostering or what have you?
Well, we're glad to connect them with anything we can, resources in the community. We have a website, it's casaov.org.
Okay.
And we're happy to do that. We have a Facebook page, and so any messaging they want to do to us, we're happy to make that connection to whatever. There's some wonderful foster care services in Davis County. We have several private foster care organizations that connect people and train them, and then the state also does that. So there's some great, we have such a great community. We have a lot of people, they just want to know what they can do. We show them a need and they always step up. So
That is true.
It's great.
It is. Well, listen, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
best
Happy
of luck.
spring.
Yes,
Finally.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you for tuning into this segment of 71 Magazine. Have a great spring, and we'll see you right back here in May.